Okay, hello and welcome to It'll Be Alright in the 90s, the podcast that needs to know if anyone's got a lighter it can borrow, as it's just got 20 Super Kings from the cigarette machine in the corner of the pub. I'm your new co-host, Adam Greenwood, and joining me as always is Alex Greenwood.
Hello. Yeah, it's nice to see you. Nice to have a fresh face in the studio for a change. I think after the unfortunate events of the last episode, it's not actually that surprising that we've got a new co-host in the studio. It was unfortunate, but there you go. There are rules, and they were sadly broken in quite spectacular fashion. But there you go. That's what happens when you deal with amateurs. I mean, there was very little choice, I think, after what happened last time. But
your hand was forced, wasn't it? Really. Exactly.
Yeah, it was. There's only so many times you can sort of forget what years are in a decade. And
I mean, for a 90s themed podcast, that counts as gross misconduct, doesn't it?
Gross negligence, yeah.
Gross negligence,
yeah. Well,
gents.
Oh,
can I just stop you there? It's me. Sorry, I'd like to read a short prepared statement if I could. On Thursday, the 28th of April, I was informed by lawyer of the pod, Jeff, that following a reference to an event which took place in May 2000 during our previously published episode on the subject of politics, a decision had been taken to remove me from my role as co-host of It'll Be Alright in the 90s. Through my own team of lawyers, I immediately appealed this decision with CAP, the Court of Arbitration for Podcast, disputing the validity and enforceability of the Podcast Code Rule 22.1a regarding the suspension or removal of a podcast co-host for repeatedly referring to events that took place during years outside of the podcast's stated decade of reference on a three-strike basis. My appeal was based around the extenuating circumstances of this event, which were given as having rubbed chili into my eyes immediately prior to the podcast recording, which caused extreme physical discomfort, which can clearly be heard on the recording, leading to a misremembering of the year that I joined secondary school. On Tuesday, the 3rd of May, I was informed that the CAP ad hoc court had upheld my appeal on these grounds, and I was duly reinstated to my role as co-host of It'll Be Alright in the 90s in time for this week's recording. I look forward to putting this behind me, getting back to co-hosting the podcast as normal, and I can confirm that plans for the pilot record of It'll Be Nice in the Noughties have now been shelved. I have no further comment to make at this time, apart from to thank Adam for stepping in for me at such short notice. I'm back, baby. How did you like that?
It's good to have you back.
It was nice to have a little taste of what it's like to be in the rains.
What it's like to read out an introduction for a podcast. Yes. Well, you did an excellent job, man. You did an excellent job. Thanks so much for standing in for me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's a little bit like the Big Sam stint in charge of England, wasn't it? Sort of. I've got a perfect record in some ways.
Do you also have a pint of wine there, by any chance?
I don't have a pint of wine. I've got 70 milliliters of hooch.
Perfect.
Oh, nice. That will obviously come into play later in the episode when we get into it and talk about today's episode, which is, of course, on cigarettes and alcohol. But we're going to come to that in a bit, I think.
Yes, absolutely. Well, talking of Appetite drinks for tonight, we've got an Appetite sponsor as well. So tonight's sponsor is Marston's Low C Beer, the lower calorie, full strength beer, which can assist weight loss as part of a controlled diet. If you simply quote the code ALRIGHT90s at participating stockists, you can claim 8 bottles for the price of 4. So thanks very much to Marston's for sponsoring us there tonight.
Well, lovely. I wish I had a can of it with me right now. I'm always trying to control my weight through beer. I
find getting 2 for the price of 1 is not necessarily the best way to aid any sort of weight loss.
No. Well,
if you've got no self-control anyway, I suppose some people would be able to sort of say that's going to last me twice as long, but other people maybe would be like, well, I'm just going to consume twice as much.
I do have a drop here. That's
my God, you're shrinking. You're shrinking before my eyes. Don't drink any more.
We have another exciting sponsorship title to talk about this week as well, don't we, Greenie?
We do indeed, yeah. We have, if you follow us on our social media channels, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, you'll have seen that we have a genuine sponsor. Not that the other sponsors for each episode aren't genuine in their own special way.
How dare you question the validity of Marston's Low C Beer's sponsorship of this podcast?
God, yeah, I hope they're not listening. They'll probably pull that deal off the shelves. But yeah, this is an extra genuine deal we have here, which is that we can proudly announce that the pod logo and the pod itself will appear on the front of the home shirt of Locomotive CS, the esteemed five-a-side team of
Football Monday Owls. It's Monday night Huntington School Pitches League.
Five-a-side league.
Six-a-side.
Six-a-side league. Oh, blimey, yeah, six-a-side, of course.
Yeah,
sorry.
We need to get that right.
Yeah.
We've had to pay for an extra shirt to be printed. There could be a five-a-side team, could they? On there.
So yes, it's a proper sponsorship deal. We will be on the shirts, and the shirts are currently on sale for order, and you can get £5 off an order for a shirt if you quote the code AllRight90s, and you need to go to the Locomotive CS social media accounts and give them a direct message, quote that code, say what size you want, give all the details in there, and you can get £5 off a replica home shirt with it'll be all right in the 90s on the front of that shirt. So please make the most of that offer, because the more people that are walking around the country wearing them, the better, as far as we're concerned. So
yeah. So we'll put some links in the episode description as well, won't we, so we can make it easy for people to find that. But no, very exciting link up, and we are extremely proud to step in where Pexton's hardware have failed.
Yeah, their loss is very much our gain, and
certainly.
Yeah, I'd hate to be in their head office when they see the things that start happening with this podcast as a result of this sponsorship. So
heads will roll, I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah, whoever's in their procurement department, I mean. What were they thinking?
Correspondence then, and regular correspondent Alex Mitchell has written in with regards to the Only Fools and Horses episode with Will Hodgson. He says that a losing streak, which is the episode with the poker game in the flat that we were talking about, is a great episode. He thinks he had a DVD with just that episode on it that came free in the paper at some point in the 90s. So that was his Only Fools and Horses collection, was a DVD that came free with the paper. Although, hang on, DVDs weren't in the 90s, were they? So there might be a slight miscalculations there. Free VHS with the newspaper?
I don't remember that, but you never know. Maybe there was.
He also says, I refuse to acknowledge the existence of the 2000s Fools and Horses episodes. Horrible return after such a perfect ending. Fools and Horses ended in 1996, and I don't think you're going to find many dissenting voices on that.
No, absolutely not. Speaking of that particular correspondent, did you know there's a strange idiosyncrasy of It'll Be Alright in the 90s where or specifically the ledger, I should say, where Alex Mitchell is actually the official Alex of the pod. Not people would think it was me. People would assume that I was the official Alex. Well, yeah. But I'm actually not. It's for some way, I don't know how it happened, but somehow Alex Mitchell is the official Alex of the pod. So
well, can we look at that or no? Because everything that goes in the ledger is that's legal and binding, isn't it?
It's pretty much carved in stone. Yeah. So, yeah. The pod. I mean, the ledger only really changes in the event of death or special extenuating circumstances.
Okay.
So yeah, that's what it is at the moment. So
wow.
But always nice to hear from the official Alex of the pod.
Absolutely. I mean, we don't make the rules, so that's something we'll have to live by, won't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh dear.
I have some stuff from Instagram. This was in response to a throwback post I made about the What's the Most 90s magazine, which we discussed recently. And we had some comments about that because obviously you went for Match Magazine and I went for Loaded. Mm-hmm. Dawson's Weekly Pod on Instagram, great friends of our Instagram, Dawson's Weekly Pod, said Sugar Magazine. So I think
like a question.
Yeah, that's exactly how they did it. So obviously we know what they think the most 90s magazine is or was. Knee Deep in the 90s said Big. Or Live and Kicking. Then they also came back and said, or Smash Hits. Smash Hits is a good shout.
That's definitely
a good one.
Yeah. Yeah.
And,
Top of the Pops magazine came in to compete with that a bit later on, I think. But no, Smash Hits was always the one for music, definitely.
Absolutely, yeah. That was what we got on the Instagram in relation to that. So we do always like to hear what your thoughts are on what's the most 90 and what's the most 90s and what our choices were. It's very much a debate we're starting here. It's not a although stuff does go in the ledger, so in some ways it doesn't feel like a debate, but it is. It's an open dialogue, and we want to hear what you think, whether we're right or wrong. So yeah, please do get in touch. Don't just wait for us to post something on Instagram or Twitter about it. Just let us know, and we'll read it out.
Please do note though that debate is fine, but once it's been debated and been decided and gone in a ledger, it then cannot be changed.
No, yeah.
It's like a tattoo. Once it's there, it's that's it. So choose carefully, choose wisely.
Yeah, exactly. Anything after it goes in letter is just meaningless musings, basically.
That's what we're here for in the main, meaningless musings, I would say. It's our mission statement distilled into 2 words, I think.
Exactly. Time now for our regular feature, What's the Most 90s? A classic It'll Be Alright in the 90s feature. And this week, Stu, I'm asking you what the most 90s footwear is.
In probably a first for a What's the Most 90s, this is something that is as fashionable today, I think, as it was in the 90s. I've gone for the Adidas Gazelle.
Oh, super.
I've got a pair myself, of course, because I'm a fashionable young man about town.
Yeah.
And I just think that in the 90s, the Gazelle was a real cross-culture shoe. I mean, from sort of football casuals to music, you know, I think Oasis and Blur were probably in Gazelles all the time. That sort of thing. It was a bit of a ubiquitous sort of trainer for the young man and young woman in the 90s. Big connotation with Euro 96 as well. When I see a Gazelle, it makes me think of Euro 96 and Badil and Skinner and all those sorts of things. So yeah, really, I didn't have much hesitation in going for the Gazelle. And as I say, you still see them around today. Still a very popular shoe. So yeah, I think that the Gazelle is a shoe for the 90s and for now.
Yeah, absolutely, I agree. Interesting what you say about the crossover between football culture and also sort of music. I used to have a Limp Bizkit poster that had Fred sort of standing right up to the fisheye lens, and he was wearing Gazelles. Mm-hmm. So of course I went out and bought some. So I did have a pair myself, which I wore them so much that the sole got so smooth that the friction coefficient was so low that I just couldn't wear them in wet weather or even like greasy weather because I would slip all over the place. So eventually I did have to get rid of them, but they were one of probably my top 5 trainer list of all time, I'd say, for personal trainers. So good choice, absolutely. My choice is also an Adidas item.
Brilliant.
My first thought was Buffalo's, actually, was because, you know, we talked about that in the fashion episode we did with Kate Pro. So I was thinking that, but then I actually went for Adidas Predator football boots. So
wow.
If we're including them as footwear, I mean, obviously they are footwear, but they're slipping over into the category of sports equipment, sportswear, but I'm having them anyway. So they were invented in '94, so bang in the 90s, and I think they are still being sold now, I think, but it was in the 90s when they were, you know, the big thing. Famous, of course, for the bobbles, the molded bobbles, which helps you spin or curl the ball like Beckham. Was Beckham the person who did the publicity for it? You know,
yeah, he wore Predators. Yeah. I mean, they've been through many iterations, but I think my favourite version of the Predator is that late 90s version with the big stripes on the side that almost go sort of invert on the side of the shoe. Yeah, classic boot for sure.
Yeah, and I remember people sort of getting them at school, and it was a big thing. You know, if you had them, it was kicking in just as I was going to secondary school, which is obviously a point where brands and what other people have and what you don't have is massive. But I was never lucky enough to have new football boots, let alone Adidas Predators. I was very much a hand-me-down football boot wearer. Arrow, do you remember Arrow football boots?
Yeah, my first pair of boots were Arrows, actually. I think from a car boot sale.
Yeah.
So yeah, I had a pair of arrows for sure.
Yeah, I was handed down arrows from my brother. They surely don't exist anymore now. Arrow.
I don't think so. I think Andy Townsend wore arrow boots. I think he was a high profile endorsee. But in the 90s, of course, then with the Predator, now you get you'll get a more budget version of the Predator, which isn't actually a Predator but looks by and large. So when it came for me having proper boots because I was playing properly, so to speak, they were normally the boots I went for. But then I pivoted more towards the Coffin Mundial and the World Cup. After that, I went for a more classic boot.
Yeah, nice.
When I could afford it, I can't now, but when I could, it was the Coffin Mundial and the World Cup.
Yeah, back in your professional playing days.
Semi-pro kit boy.
Yeah, I'm surprised you didn't get endorsed and get them sent to you from the company, but I guess.
I did ask a glove firm once. There's a glove firm called Zapcam who are based in Stroud. I bought a couple of pairs from them, and I did inquire about a couple of free pairs, but nothing ever came of that, unfortunately.
Oh well, their loss. They let it slip through their hands. That particular deal.
Excellent, lovely bit of business.
You can please edit that out.
This week on the pod, we're talking cigarettes and alcohol in the 90s. Adam has joined us once again to discuss this, and we're going to get straight into it. I'm going to get straight into it with my top 3 cigarette and alcohol football shirt sponsors from the 90s. You ready for this, chaps?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so I've got number 3, I've got McEwen's Lager, Blackburn Rovers and Newcastle. I actually had the Blackburn shirt for some reason. Don't know why. It was the Champions 95 shirt.
Yeah.
At number 2, I've got the Coors-sponsored Chelsea shirt, mainly for the 97 Cup final when Roberto Di Matteo obviously scored after 40 seconds, but also for that lovely grey and orange away kit that they had for a couple of seasons with that sponsorship.
Mm-hmm.
And at number 1, I've gone for Labatt's for Nottingham Forest.
Oh, yeah, excellent choice.
Yeah, just a very sleek shirt, sleek sponsor, shirt I've always admired. I've got my eye out for one, actually, if one pops up at a reasonable price. Labatt's unfortunately not a beer that you really see around in the UK anymore, but very famous for being on Forest shirts. So that's what I've gone for as my number 1 alcohol sponsor for the 90s.
Brilliant stuff. I think the other ones that I would maybe have on my list or could be added if you're going to do a top 5 I would say Holsten Pils for Spurs.
Of course,
a classic beer company sponsor, and then Newcastle Brown Ale, maybe one of the most iconic logos to have on a football shirt. I like that. And I think there was a team that had Strongbow. Oh, Leeds had Strongbow, didn't they, at some point? But again, maybe post 90s, I'm not sure. It's not something you see anymore, is it? Beer on football shirts. There's time in it.
No, and probably rightly so. Unfortunately, it's gone the same way as I say. Unfortunately, again, it's probably the right thing, but it's gone the same way as tobacco sponsorship for racing cars, which is a subject that's close to all of our hearts and which we've discussed many times before.
Yeah, close to our hearts, close to our lungs. I will be talking about that in a bit. I don't want to give away my top 3 Formula 1 cigarette sponsors yet, but
no, quite right.
I want people to I want people to be hanging on, listening to the end for that, because I know everyone is gonna be desperate to find out what that is. But yeah, no, good countdown.
I said you don't see Labatt's very often or at all in supermarkets anymore. But one of the other things I was thinking about was the brands that my parents and my family used to drink in the 90s that I don't see around anymore. And I've had a look at a couple. The one that I remember most is because it was my dad's weapon of choice for a few years, was a lager called Rolling Rock.
Okay. Yeah, it's very American, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think it was American, yeah.
It came in green bottles. And it's still available in the US, but not available in the UK anymore. But that's one that I remember having a big presence around our home back in the day. And also, my granddad used to enjoy a tin of whitbread as well.
That just sounds old-fashioned. I was
going to say I've never heard of whitbread before, but it does sound like something that someone's grandparents would drink.
Well, the cans were dark green. They were dark green, and they had that, and the logo was red, so it was a very sort of austere looking thing as well. And that's a big memory from a Thursday night at my gran and granddad's house, and the whitbread would come out.
Nice.
Not for me, I hasten to add, but
Yeah, I mean, Adam, I don't know what you do. You remember anything about what mum and dad drank? I mean, this is a rare opportunity for us to discuss our parents together on the pod, rather than just me.
I'm going to sit back and enjoy this. I want to hear some brotherly discourse here about growing up in the Greenwood household.
I don't really remember if there was a particular brand or anything they drank. I'm sure there was always like those little sort of stubby bottles of French
beer d'Alsace.
Yeah, that sort of thing.
Yeah, they've definitely always been around in the Greenwood Grove and the family households. And if I get the opportunity to buy some, I will always get some, just I think to keep that sort of family tradition going. And they're great for summer. I mean, you can also get the little stubbies that are shandy. You need to go you need to go to a bigger supermarket to get them, but they're great when in the height of summer. I
feel like that's the sort of thing to drink when you've got the Tour de France on in the background somehow, but that's probably just through nostalgia.
Yeah, oh definitely. I remember Dad drinking cider out of, I think it was Sainsbury's own brand cider. I can still picture the cans. And I remember thinking or saying like, this, you can buy this in pubs. Like I was not confused, but sort of surprised that you could buy cider in pubs, because it seemed like almost like a kid's drink, like alcoholic apple juice. But I remember him drinking that. And Bass. I think Bass was his favourite at that point. I don't think it is anymore. And I'm always on the lookout for Bass in pubs. I think that's a bit of a tradition amongst pub drinkers, maybe just in Bristol, but people are always looking for Bass on tap. It's like a thing.
Oh, right.
I guess it's an old school beer name, and I think it's Southwest, isn't it? Bass, is it like Trowbridge or something?
It is, yeah, or it was.
Yeah.
When Bass is mentioned, the thing that immediately comes to mind for me is shandy.
Yes, of course.
Can you still get tins of shandy Bass in chip shops?
No, I don't think you can.
That was the only place I ever seem to remember seeing it get sold. Yeah. And I remember a kid in my year bringing a can in for his lunch to school and immediately having it confiscated. But it's all right. It's shandy, but no, it really isn't. That's another thing. The demise of the tin of shandy Bass in the chip shop. That's
Has it really disappeared? I feel like maybe I'm just sort of thinking of other old school chip shop drinks like Dandelion and Burdock.
I'm not sure. I don't suppose I've really looked in a chip shop drinks cabinet for quite a while.
Yeah, I can solve this because I have actually looked it up, and they've stopped doing it. It's gone. It's finished.
Oh man!
It looks like it was on sale as recently as 2020, though, according to the Tesco website.
Okay, it was more recent than I thought.
So we're saying that the pandemic has claimed another victim in
yeah, possibly the most high-profile victim of the pandemic that we've yet heard of. I would always get a Ben Shaw's cream soda if I was in a chip shop, and that was available. It's the best cream soda, the Ben Shaw. So look out for that, listener, if you're ever in a chippy looking for something incredibly sweet. It's an acquired taste.
Yeah,
it's sophisticated, isn't it? Not everyone likes it.
Is it sophisticated though?
Yes, it is. I'm amazed that they can recreate that creamy flavour without ice cream. My mind has always been blown by that. Like same with Perfectly Clear. If in my category of drinks I don't understand how they make taste like they do. Do you remember Perfectly Clear? It was like a fizzy drink, a fruit fizzy drink, and it was perfectly clear.
No, I don't, I'm afraid.
And my mind was always blown that they can make it taste all that nice with no colour. But
was that around the same time as Tab Clear and Pepsi Crystal or whatever?
Yeah, I guess so. It was sort of early mid-90s, I think. The craze for clear colas.
Do you think that corresponded, because there was a definite period in the 90s, I think it was the 90s and not 2000s, when it was very fashionable for things to be see-through, so you could see the inner workings of, say, a Game Boy or like a phone or something.
I remember those phones.
Maybe the idea of something being see-through was a see-through drink, see-through like phone case.
Yeah, we maybe in a world of political sleaze and dodgy dealings and Robert Maxwell and all that sort of stuff, we were all just desperate to be able to see through things clearly and see what was really going on. That's my theory.
Maybe they thought at the headquarters of whoever was making that perfectly clear drink. They thought, start here with the fizzy drinks, and transparency will slowly filter up through to politics.
The original trickle down theory.
Yeah. Well, it would be trickle up because of the carbonation, I guess.
Yeah, that's true.
We just blown the lid off that there.
We have.
Fantastic. And look out for a link up with a cream soda manufacturer in a forthcoming episode as well.
Yeah, sorry, that was my fault. We strayed into non-alcoholic beverages, which is absolutely not on the table tonight. We're supposed to be keeping it very much alcoholic and over 18s only.
Well, in order to do that, I can take you back to my first sort of dealings in the world of alcoholic and over 18 areas when I was 11. So we can look at that. And I was in year 6. This is definitely 1999. Just gonna get that out of the way now.
Okay.
And all of the year 6 classes at Corsham Primary signed up to the D.A.R.E program.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I thought that was like an American thing.
It very much is an American thing, but I don't know if it ever gained much of a foothold in the UK, but I definitely went through the D.A.R.E program. And we had PC Radcliffe, who used to come in and talk to us once every couple of weeks. And thinking about PC Radcliffe reminded me of an earlier talk from a police officer at primary school when I was in about year 2 or 3. And this police officer came in and said, "Okay, everybody, my name's PC Digby, no relation to Fraser." Right? Now,
yeah,
I knew, and you know clearly, that is a lovely bit of business regarding the Swindon goalkeeper at the time, Fraser Digby.
Yeah.
Nobody else in the room knew at all about that because everybody was
yeah.
like a Man United fan or whatever.
Yeah.
So this is probably something that played well in the Swindon primary schools, but when it came out to Corsham, it wasn't gonna get any traction there. So anyway, that's that. Sorry, that's besides the point. Anyway, PC Radcliffe used to come in and do us and do the D.A.R.E program with us, but I could remember that there was a song that was played through one of those Kumba tape players. You remember the little Kumba tape players with the
Kumba,
with the built-in microphone, and it had one speaker and all this sort of thing. And I managed to track down the song on YouTube, and I will play some in the edit, but I just want to read out the lyrics to you here. So this is what we were singing in the classroom, right? This was the D.A.R.E song.
The world's a different place where lights become a race. And unlike the world of past, our kids grow up too fast. 'Cause what they see in storms is threats of bombs and war. And that deadly game they're taught that happiness is born. So the children of today haven't time for child's play. They feel they're all alone, even strangers in their home. So they hide the pain and tears, they destroy their youthful years by giving up on loving hugs and escaping into drugs. And if we say that we won't help 'cause the problem isn't mine, then it's more than just a shame. All that they're carrying is a crime. Dare to keep a kid off drugs. Dare to keep a kid off drugs. Dare to give a kid some help. Dare to give a kid some hope. Dare to keep a kid off drugs.
So those are the lyrics from the D.A.R.E song that we all used to sing at the end of every session. I have another story relating to the D.A.R.E program, which was linked to it, which I'll relate later on. But I mean, it must have worked because I've never been known to dabble in Class A's ever since then. So there you go. The D.A.R.E program obviously effective.
Yeah, brilliant. I liked how they tied in the dying embers of the Cold War and the threat of nuclear strikes into. It sounded like they were saying that kids are turning to drink and drugs because they're worried about bombs and stuff.
Yeah, what they see in store is threats of bombs and war. Absolutely.
I never really never thought about that, but yeah, that probably is true.
Yeah.
That's why I didn't drink or take hard drugs when I was in my my childhood because the Cold War, the Berlin Wall had come down, so I was teetotal. I didn't need it.
If I think about it, this was 1999, and this song, I mean, it's feasible that it could have been 10 years old, 12 years old by this point, because when I play it into the episode, you will hear that stylistically it's very... If David Hasselhoff had recorded it, that's the sort of vibe.
Okay, yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
They call that music genre a Cold War core. Because, so tied in with the conflict.
So that's the D.A.R.E program. So that really was my introduction to, making sure I said no to things and didn't do anything I shouldn't. Oh, we got a free T-shirt as well each. I didn't mention that.
Oh, okay, so that's why you didn't do the Class A's.
Well, I had the T-shirt. I couldn't not be faithful to the T-shirt, could I?
No, it's true. And this is going to bring the tone to a more serious place. But do you remember Leah Betts? The Leah Betts
yes. Yeah.
Story. And I was thinking a few years ago how this is, anyone who doesn't remember or doesn't know, Leah Betts was a teenager who died from taking ecstasy. I think on her first time taking ecstasy on her 18th birthday. And it was used as intentionally by her family, I think her dad especially, sort of was keen to use this story and this tragedy to sort of educate other young people about drugs and the dangers of drugs. And it was used a lot. And I remember being told about it at school a lot because it really stuck in my mind. And I was thinking the other day about how, because I never really did any like party drugs like MDMA or anything like that. I guess I never quite know where speed, ecstasy and MDMA all connect, and which is different from the other, whatever. But I never did any of them really. And I was thinking this because I had been indoctrinated that those things were so dangerous that if you took them once, you could die. And so many other people I know, almost everyone else I know, did or still does those drugs, like in the same way that I drink alcohol, pretty much. Mm-hmm. Maybe not that much, but they just treat it as something that isn't dangerous at all. And I was thinking how frustrated I was. I felt like I had been indoctrinated. And I'd sort of fallen for that I'd been told this was so dangerous that you'll die if you do it once. And that was sort of frustrating because I felt like I'd missed out on this element of nightlife and something that seemed quite fun because of that. And I was sort of, I felt like a bit of a sucker. And I mean, I don't know. I understand why they did it, especially her family, but it was a bit of and I sort of read it up about it as well on Wikipedia, and it was like she had a pre-existing, it sort of combined with something else. So it wasn't even that it was just the drugs. And I thought they really sort of had us a little bit in that way. And that was annoying to me. But yeah, I don't know if you think that played a part in your upbringing at all, that story. Or
I definitely remember it. I mean, I think there was another one where I don't remember the person's name, but I think the family, they had an overdose and passed away or something like that. And their family actually released the photographs of how their body was found as a cautionary tactic against this. So lots of instances of that, it would appear, in during the decade. Do you really think that your life would have been enhanced if that hadn't have happened and you had taken all these things without fear of recrimination?
I think I would have had longer nights out and maybe had a bit more energy on nights out and stuff. But so I don't really regret it that much. It was more a case of me just sort of realizing why I'd had that, like why I'd sort of gone down that route, and why a lot of other people hadn't. And it was just, so I guess it was more interesting to me than annoying. I just think, I suppose I thought I'd never be the sort of fall foul of a kind of media campaign like that, a sort of, because there's obviously been lots of different ones through the generations of like swearing in music and rap music and various things like that sort of we get warned about at different stages. But I just realized that I probably had been suckered in by that. But yeah, you're right. I mean, like it's a silly thing to regret. So I guess it's more a case of just of realizing that was what had happened. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I mean, Adam, you must have been a bit older when that happened.
I don't remember how old I was, but I do remember hearing about it, and I think most people of my generation probably would recognize the name or remember the name. It sort of sticks in your memory a little bit. It probably was on Newsround or something, so and a big sort of shocking sort of story at the time. And maybe drugs were, or sort of party drugs like that were becoming popular around that time, so maybe it was sort of like a new craze or something, perhaps, or the first time that there was like a notable casualty of this new craze or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think the fact that we all three of us recognize the name Leo Betson, I think you could ask anyone of our generation if they recognize the name Leo Betson, like you say, most people probably would, is just testament to how much coverage it got and the campaign, the size of the campaign. Because, I mean, how many young people must die as a result of alcohol, and must have died as a result of alcohol in those days? And, we don't know any of their names. So it really was like a strong campaign and a huge amount of media coverage. So
to be sort of cynical about it, I suppose the fact that she was young and it was the first time that she tried it, that's an angle that the press sort of isn't it? Like young life tragically taken away through one misstep would have been, I guess, the angle that they would have gone with.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sorry for bringing the tone down, but it just occurred to me while you were saying that. I thought I had to. If I didn't say this on this podcast, I don't think I'll ever get a chance to bring up my my thoughts on drug warnings when we were young. I'm going to lighten the mood by talking about my top 3 F1 cigarette sponsorships. Okay?
Yes, let's have it.
I know I'm going to give it away early, so people might switch off immediately, but there you go. It's a risk I'm going to take. So my top 3 F1 tobacco sponsorship liveries are, of course, number 1 is Marlboro, which I think we can all agree is the king of motorsport liveries.
You're starting with number 1. You got to go from number 3.
My head's gone. It's because I was thinking
totally
about
gone.
it's the I've blown it.
Anyway, they're going to turn off even quicker now.
And you know what? Let's not say their number. Well, no, I've already said it's the king of king.
No, mate, it's gone.
So
it's gone.
It's gone. Yeah.
No.
Okay.
No going back.
Well, there you go.
Go on, then. What's number 2? Come on.
The live fast, die young in this game. So Marlboro, king of motorsport liveries, most famous in Formula One for. Well, I was going to say for McLaren. It is for McLaren. It was then went to Ferrari when Schumacher was winning all the titles, but I think most iconically it's with McLaren. So with Senna in the 80s, but then into the 90s with the Hakkinen Coulthard days as well. They obviously then switched to West to McLaren for their most successful seasons. Another tobacco sponsor. My second choice was Rothmans for the 94-97 Williams cars, iconic blue, white, red and gold liveries. And maybe this is my personal favourite. So let's say that I have kept my personal favourite to last, so it's not a complete disaster. Mile 7, 1994 to 99, Benetton's beautiful liveries. I think my favourite would be maybe 95, maybe 94. Lovely light blue, dark blue sort of hue, combined with the green of the Benetton's was just spot on. It was also appeared on some Tyrrell cars. I don't think I ever saw a packet of Mile 7. I never saw any adverts. You would see adverts for Marlboro, like Marlboro Man and stuff on billboards. But have you ever seen a Mile 7 cigarette?
No, I mean a lot of them. I don't think West was a big UK thing either. Or if I was a smoker, I think Lucky Strike would have been my brand.
That's the coolest brand, definitely.
Yeah. But again, not to be found really in the UK. So there were Winfield as well.
Yeah, Well, I think Winfield was connected to Rothmans, wasn't it? Because Williams switched to it. Maybe it was like an American brand, but Lucky Strike makes me think of a GI in Vietnam having a packet of Lucky Strikes rolled up into their t-shirt sleeve. I don't know where that must be a famous image or something. I don't know, but I always thought Mile 7 was a weird name for a cigarette as well. Just a weird name for anything really.
Well, let's not forget. I know we've discussed this before, but let's not forget the bizarre situation where tobacco brands were not allowed to directly advertise on the cars. So towards the end of the decade, and we ended up with things like buzzing hornets for Benson and Hedges on the Jordan cars, and I think West in the end went with Mika and David, but in the West branding.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and then I think Rothman's quite often just had racing. There's some really odd ones as well, like there was a dot and a question mark, I think, on some Rothman's ones. But that sort of continues now, even though tobacco sponsorship was banned completely, not just because that was just on certain races, wasn't it? They would do that, depending on the country. But now there is still this weird, shady thing going on with, especially Marlboro, still make millions from Formula One sponsorship, even though they're not on the car. So it's like this weird coded stuff going on. But that's not 90, so we won't talk about that. But I also just want to give a quick shout out to Silk Cut on the Jaguar sort of sports cars. I think most famous in '88, but also just about got into the 90s. So another beautiful livery. I don't know about you. I always sort of mix Silk Cut up with Milk Tray a bit because they were both purple, and they had something that sounded like ilk. They had ilk in it, milk and silk.
So you can imagine a man sort of in a turtleneck and like a sharp suit sneaking into your bedroom to leave a packet of Silk Cut.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's my thoughts on sponsorship of tobacco in Formula One and racing cars. I don't think beer was such a big thing, beer and alcohol. I mean, I guess there was Johnny Walker in pre-90s, but was there any beer? I think there was famously in touring cars there was a Caliber.
That's right, yeah, and in the early 90s, Labatt's as well. Again,
yes,
Labatt's had a Sierra. Well, it was mainly in the very early 90s. If you wanted to be competitive, you had to have a Sierra. So it was all Sierras in early 90s touring cars. But you're right. It was definitely more prevalent in the in touring cars with alcohol manufacturing for sure. But I remember the Labatt cars also had "Never Drink and Drive" written on them as well. So taking a modicum of responsibility. Which was good to see.
Going back a little bit to what you were saying about when they had to find workarounds for having the sponsor's name. There was one that stands out. I've never really been interested in Formula One, but I think I would have seen this on some poster, maybe in Alex's wall growing up. But was Benson and Hedges? They changed their name to Bitten and Hisses, and I seem to remember the car livery was made to look like a snake. But is that something that happened, or have I imagined that?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the first iteration of that was Bitten and Hisses. The 97 car had the snake on the front, and then I think Stu, you just mentioned Buzzin' and Hornets, which was 97 and 98 because they changed the front to like a Hornet's face, which didn't look as good. I mean, the snake was genius. I mean, that was just mind blowing when that came out, and they sort of incorporated this animal into the livery. But well remembered. Bitten and Hisses. I have a mini Champs 143 scale of that 97 Jordan somewhere at our parents' house. I need to get it out, get it on display. It was a bit frustrating that they didn't have the cigarette sponsorship on the die-cast replicas. I guess for understandable reasons, but disappointing nevertheless.
For the realism purists.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say I wouldn't have smoked just because it was on my diecast, but I definitely would have done. I mean, I know what cigarettes I would have been smoking, and it would have corresponded exactly with whoever I was supporting in Formula One that year.
Again, not having been that interested in Formula One, I'm assuming that I know Alex has, maybe Stu has as well, been to actually, have you been to a Formula One race?
I have, yeah. I won.
I haven't, I'm afraid.
I won a ticket to 97 on Fantasy Formula One in the Times.
Oh, right.
Amazing.
Hang on, wait a minute. This has never come out before. You won Fantasy Formula One.
I won a week or a month or something, which was, I mean, I was 11 or 12, I guess. And I don't remember really putting that much effort into it, or giving it that much attention. I guess I maybe did. And then just suddenly this stuff appeared in the post. This was when you had to do it in the newspaper. That was obviously pre-internet, so you had to post stuff off and stuff. And we just arrived saying, yeah, you've won a VIP tickets to the British Grand Prix in 1997. It was incredible.
Wow. So what kind of benefits did you get from that? Sorry, hang on. The first question has to be, how do you play Fantasy Formula One? Because clearly it doesn't work like fantasy football.
No,
because it's a different sport, right? So what? So what was the mechanics of the game?
I think you had a certain amount of money, and you'd have to pick like 6 drivers maybe, and a couple of teams or something like that, and then you would get the points. The same as when you pick players in fantasy football, you would get points based on their results and I don't know what's it called, qualifying and stuff like that. So somehow I must have just had a brilliant game week, and I went to Silverstone with my dad. I remember him not announcing it, but telling me by like getting me to come into the kitchen, and then he put on The Chain by Fleetwood Mac, put it on the radio, so it played the Formula One intro music, and then got this bag out and pulled out these these tickets and said, we're going to Silverstone. It was very exciting. I remember being in a hospitality suite thing down the Hangar Straight, and we had a seat in the grandstand at the end of Hangar Straight, where that I can't remember what the corner is, the famous corner at Silverstone at the end of Hangar Straight, and so we had a talk from Jonathan Palmer, who I think was in Formula One for about 5 minutes, and was
touring cars as well. Jonathan Palmer, yeah.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah.
Yeah.
And I still have the Ferrari flag, which I bought from one of the official merchandise vendors, and John Lacey went past me on a moped when he'd retired from the race. That's kind of what I remember. The one thing I do really remember was the noise, which unfortunately, well, it makes sense why we don't get it anymore, but we'll never hear it again. That engine noise, but it was so loud, like unbelievably loud. But it was wild.
Well, can I tell you about my first cigarette?
Yes, please do.
Weston-super-Mare Pier, about 1996 or 7.
Yeah.
I think you know where I'm going here. I spotted a fake smoking cigarette in one of the booths in the pier, and it was 20p, which I happened to have on me. So I sort of broke away from my parents and went and bought this. And it's a bit of paper and that. It's made to look like a cigarette, and there's some flour or whatever in the end, and we just blow it, and it makes a smoke. And I remember walking back towards my parents with this, who hadn't accompanied me, and my mum was completely taken in by it. Like, where did you get that? What's this? All this sort of thing. And quickly explained that it was a fake. But that was then something that I was partial to a fake cigarette then for quite a while. If I had like some money left over, like from my pocket money or whatever, I'd buy some. I'd know where to get them in Chippenham, and I would buy some fake smoking cigarettes and walk around thinking I was a don, man. It was it was heady times.
You were addicted to fake cigarettes.
Oh,
did you have to?
The irony.
Did you have to get fake nicotine patches to get off?
I've got my fake vape now. It's moved on a bit. But,
and you had to get your fake cigarettes from a fake dodgy guy from the tuck shop at school. You know, he'd sort of he found them like in his inside pocket or something. Like.
Pound
each.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, I'm going to mention a little bit of correspondence early here, which is kind of breaking the rules. But Nat Bennett, friend of the pod, mentioned the chocolate cigarettes, which I don't think you can buy anymore. But I remember buying them in Chaplin's in Corsham, which has been mentioned on the pod before. But you could buy like a range, an assortment of different cigarette style packets, and it was really crap chocolate wrapped in sugar paper. Yeah, horrible chocolate.
Yeah,
that sort of grainy, cheap stuff. That but I liked them for a bit. Like, I guess because I was taken in by cigarette sponsorship and I just wanted to be part of that lifestyle. But had one rolled up in my t-shirt sleeve.
Do you ever get any fake cigarettes or chocolate cigarettes at the old airport duty free, right next to the boxes of 1,000 B&H, and then you've got a box of 1,000 box of 1,000 chocolate cigarettes? Yeah, I remember having a packet of those at some football ground that me and my dad were at in the might have been Calm, I don't know, but yeah, I seem to remember that. Moving on from the fake cigarette, I remember. Again, just when I was thinking about that, because the shop to get the fake cigarettes was in Emery Gate, and then a memory appeared of I just bought the album, we've mentioned it before on the pod, by a band called the Dum Dums.
Yeah.
It was their first album called It Goes Without Saying, and I must have bought it in Woolworths, I think. And I was on one of the benches in the shopping centre reading through the liner notes. I think my parents must have been in a different shop, and I was just looking at the booklet, which I still have. But I clearly remember looking down at this booklet in my lap, and then just a cloud of cigarette smoke just coming across, and a lady had sat on the bench on the other end of the bench next to me, and just sparked up. Yeah, this was late 90s, early 2000s, and to think of it now as that, you know, an adult would sit next to a child on a bench in an indoor area who they didn't know and just light and smoke a cigarette. It just seems so bizarre now. And I get that feeling again when I watch. I'm a big fan of TV shows like Minder and the Sweeney and things like that, and Only Fools and Horses, as obviously listeners of the pod will know. And it just seems so jarring now when you see smoking like inside pubs or in train stations or wherever. It just seems like it's such a, you know, the smoking inside has only been banned for 15 years or so, but it just seems like a world away now.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, coming back from pubs and clubs and just stinking of stale smoke was just horrible.
Can I tell you my other D.A.R.E story?
Oh, please do, yeah.
Okay, so we did the D.A.R.E program, which was a series of classroom sessions, as I've already said, and it culminated in the Year 6 classes giving an assembly to the rest of the school on what they'd learned, as these things normally did in primary school. And when you did a big topic, normally you would present an assembly on the subject. At the time, it's been well established that my favourite band at the time were Stereophonics. And at the time, their big hit was they had collaborated with Tom Jones for a version of Mama Told Me Not to Come by a band called Three Dog Night, which became quite a big hit. And I took it upon myself for performance at the D.A.R.E assembly to rewrite this song under the new title. Any guesses? Any guesses what the new title would be?
Mama told me not to smoke.
I was going to say
got it in one. It's Mama Told Me Not to Smoke. Mama told me not to smoke. So, and the song starts with the line, "Want some whiskey in your water." So there's that as well, which obviously made it a prime candidate for rewriting for this purpose. Unfortunately, I can't remember any of the other lyrics that I wrote, but I do remember that the original song is just in the chorus. It just repeats, "Mama told me not to come. Mama told me not to come." But my lines were, "Mama told me not to smoke. Mama said, don't take no coke." And I just, I hope that I helped play a part in getting the message across. That's all. That's all I was looking to do.
Oh, I didn't realize you were such a narc growing up.
But of course, I had the CD single, which they put on for me to sing over, but that had the original lyrics on it. So it wasn't a backing track; it was the actual song, and there was no microphone. So God knows how it came out. I don't know. Maybe the first row could sort of understand what I was saying.
They probably thought you were singing note perfect to the original, like the normal version, because they could just hear the lyrics of that and see your mouth moving and thought, wow, he's doing a great cover.
Yeah, I guess so. It's got nothing to do with the D.A.R.E assembly. I'm not entirely sure why he's doing this, but yeah. So I was sort of constrained by the technological equipment of the day, but yeah, I mean, like I say, it was just something I did and to help out, and yeah, I like to think it stuck with some people and help them on their way. If you're going to call me a narc, then I'm happy with that.
Did the kids ever come? Well, not kids. Do other adults come up to you in the street and say, "Oh, I owe my health to you because of that rendition of."
Absolutely. It's often Year 6 kids from other classes who I don't recognise and don't remember. And they'll come up to me and say, I've always taken that and remembered it. Like, one of the 2 or 3. I think you get 2 or 3 sage pieces of advice throughout your life that probably stick with you and guide you, through adulthood. And I'd like to think that Mama Told Me Not to Smoke fulfilled that role for a few people at least.
Yeah.
I mean, it's better than fucking what they see in stories, threats of bombs and war. I mean,
yeah, that's true. It is better than that. Yeah.
I've updated it. I've taken it and got it to play to a new audience.
Yeah.
I didn't really get the thanks I deserved for it. I think from the good people at D.A.R.E. I mean, the free T-shirt was nice, but
yeah,
it'll only go so far.
we've talked about sponsorship, but what about adverts? Beer adverts, especially. I mean, I don't really remember many cigarette adverts. I think cigarette advertising probably was on its way out in the 90s, but
well, there's one that sticks in my mind because it was in the middle of a Rolling Stones concert that my dad videoed off the TV,
nice.
which he used to watch all the time. And it was at a time when Billy Connolly was doing adverts for Caliber.
Okay.
Which is obviously a non-alcoholic or low alcoholic lager. I don't know if it's low calorie, but it was certainly low alcohol. And he was saying about all the things you could do with improved concentration and if you drink Caliber. And he was like heading a football, constantly heading it up in the air. And then he sort of stops that and goes to take a drink of Caliber. The ball's on like a piece of elastic or whatever, and it's being bounced for him on his head, so it's not really him doing it, and that's the joke of the advert. Going back briefly to the touring cars. I think Caliber sponsored the Williams Renaults at one point as well.
Did they?
So
okay.
yeah. I think they were quite a big part of sponsorship as well. So the Caliber one is one that sticks in my mind, and I know we've had a bit of correspondence on this as well.
While I'm digging it out, Adam, what do you have any adverts that you remember?
Going back a little bit to what Stu was saying about his dad's drink of choice being Rolling Rock. One of the really early alcohol adverts that I remember making sort of like quite a good impression, because there had been adverts before that I would have seen, but never anything that made me think, oh, that looks quite cool, that drink looks quite cool. There would have been quite funny adverts or clever adverts or something, but it was the Rolling Rock advert with Drinking in LA by Brand Van 3000, which became and sort of still is one of my favorite songs of the 90s. And the video, I sort of looked that up earlier, and it's very 90s sort of first person camera following someone on what is sort of like a wild night out in, I guess it sort of looked like a sort of Vegas-esque, sort of lots of neon, and someone hands them a snake at one point, and then they're like invited to get into bed with a woman on a bed of nails, and it was just like a very cool sort of mid to late 90s video, and it made the drink look very cool and appealing. And I remember the first time I ever saw it in a bar thinking, I want to drink some of that because I remember that advert.
Yeah, I think I remember you saying that has reminded me vaguely. I'm gonna have to try and look that up. Maybe we'll try and get a clip to link in the episode description. But that's coming back.
Is part of the first person thing like a bottle of Rolling Rock being?
That was what they used for the transitions. The transitions between the different scenes of the night out were masked by the bottle coming up into the shot.
I have a very clear memory of Brand Van 3000 performing on Top of the Pops, and as the camera was sort of sweeping into the stage for the first time on them, a bottle appeared in that manner, and it had Brand Van 3000 on the label. So obviously it's a tie-in with the advert, and now I understand.
Well, it was their only big hit, and I think the advert probably helped break them. It was like their first sort of single off their first album, and I don't know if they had any others after that. Certainly not that sort of that I remember. But
I had it on cassette. I definitely bought it.
Yeah.
So the advert was probably like a big. I guess the Top of the Pops performance was them acknowledging, it's us from the advert.
Yeah, so I do have a bit of correspondence here about adverts. This is from Tim Parker, friend of the pod. He says, Carling Black Label adverts, and in particular the one where there's some people beating some German tourists to the sun lounges. I kind of remember that, but I'm going to have to look that up. Other people will remember that, I'm sure. And he also says the Dam Busters one, which again I don't remember, but I'm sure people will recognise that, a Carling Black Label advert involving a Dam Busters team.
A sort of vague dog whistle nationalism, it sounds like, with both of those, doesn't it?
Yeah, both of them, yeah. And then Tim also says one of the best adverts of all time is the Guinness Surfer one, which aired in 1999. We all know what he's talking about there. Maybe the most famous advert of the 90s, definitely the most famous beer advert of the 90s and of all time, I'd say. Well, of our generation, I don't know about earlier, but and then he signs off by saying, "No wonder I like a few beers," and I can confirm that Tim does like a few beers.
Certainly does.
I've drunk a few with him over the years. So yeah, are there any adverts we've missed out?
Boddington's had a big. When I was sort of thinking about this, there was Boddington's. I don't even know if they're really still around, but they had a big moment with their. You sort of notice that certain companies or brands have like a patch where their advertising team are obviously like really hot, and they have like a really great patch of like Volkswagen for a while had loads of really great adverts, and Guinness did. And I think in the 90s, early to mid 90s, Boddington's were on that sort of form. They were doing loads of sort of quite funny adverts. Like there's one where it looks like they're in Venice and there's two people on a gondola, and a woman reaches over and grabs what looks initially like an ice cream from a man in another gondola, and it turns out to be pints of Boddingtons, and it turns out they're on the canals in Manchester, and it's quite clever. And there's one with Melanie Sykes, which I sort of remember the catchphrase, like, "Do you want a flake in that, love?" But when I watched the video back, there was a load that I didn't really remember. I didn't really remember the setup to it at all, but it sort of like starts off looking like an advert for some sort of performance sportswear or something, like a guy running through what looks like a desert landscape chasing after a sort of fast moving vehicle, and then it turns out to be an ice cream van selling Boddingtons.
Yeah, that is a good advert. That came up when I was researching this episode. Yeah, and that like you say, the that catchphrase is iconic. The "Do you want a flake in that, love?" Someone also mentioned, this was from Lay, friend of the pod, Lay, mentioned on Facebook, I think, Mets. And now, I mean, this actually did start in 2000, so I shouldn't really be discussing this, but I will just quickly mention their Judderman adverts. I couldn't remember Mets as a drink, but I did remember the Judderman adverts, which is like a sort of half stop motion, half CGI advert. And that was, Mets was a Alco Pop. I just wanted to give that a shout out, because I think 2000 is starting to become an honorary member of the decade. So
was it a bit in there? Babadook-esque, the Judderman?
Yeah, it was a bit, I think. But the advert's on YouTube, so yeah, you can go and check that out.
The another two which I'd completely forgotten about until today, when my partner Vicky reminded me, was the two Budweiser adverts, which were sort of huge, like the frogs, the Budweiser Frogs, and then the Was Up one. And I know the Was Up one was a big deal because I sort of remember that being a thing that people did or people parodied. It sort of seeped into like the general social like conversation, and it was parodied in Scary Movie, I think, at one point. And I was going to do some reading about that, but I got caught up and went down a rabbit hole with the Budweiser Frogs, because I sort of remember the main advert, and I remember the Simpsons episode that sort of made fun of it a little bit. But I didn't realize there was about 15 minutes worth in total of, it was like a sort of an ongoing storyline with the frogs that culminates with a talking chameleon and a ferret actually releasing a CD of cover versions. I don't know what year that was. But
Wow.
Right. Wow. Okay. That deserves further examination, I think, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I can give you a rundown of the sort of synopsis of the ongoing storyline. The first video is the one which you probably remember, which is just the frogs sort of one by one saying like Budweiser, and then the camera pans up and you see like the neon lights of a bar, and it sort of says Budweiser. But then after that, it's sort of, next one is that again in the swamp, a truck goes past with like a Budweiser shipment truck goes past, and one of them sticks its tongue out as if it's going to catch a fly, hits the back of the truck, and then it gets sort of whipped off behind this truck. Sort of a basic sort of slapstick sort of gag. The next one is along the same lines. They accidentally set a speedboat in motion by like trying to catch a fly that's landed on the ignition thing, and like the speedboat goes like racing off through the swamp. Then there's one where they obviously paid out to have a Bob Marley track in the advert, and it's them on the back of an alligator, which sort of goes into the pub, and then they walk out with like a crate of Budweiser on its back. There's a love interest after that with just one frog that's mating call is Bud, and then the female's mating call is Wise, and then when they meet, there's a sort of like I don't really know how to sort of do it justice, but it's sort of like a winking sort of eyebrow raising. I mean, frogs don't have eyebrows, but if they did, it would be like a raised eyebrow, like Budweiser sort of thing.
Yeah.
And then after that, it takes like a real turn. And apparently this was because there was a bit of a backlash, people saying that the frogs were mascots that were aimed at kids that were not really appropriate for an adult product like beer. So what they decided to do apparently was make it more of an adult sort of concept by introducing talking chameleons instead, because I guess kids are interested in talking frogs but not talking chameleons. And the chameleons start off by sort of complaining about how they auditioned for the role in the advert, or auditioned for the advert, didn't get it, went to the frogs, and they're sort of a bit bitter about it. And one of the chameleons in particular is especially aggrieved about it, and he plots an assassination attempt with a ferret. The ferret pushes the neon sign into the swamp to electrocute the frogs. The frogs seem to die, but then somehow survives in time for the next advert. But one of them has a permanent nervous tic as a result of it, and so has to drop out of the adverts. The chameleon steps in and is terrible, sort of too hammy doing the line. He's supposed to be doing wise, but he's sort of, these are very Brooklyn, New York accented chameleons. Yeah, he's sort of like a big sort of over theatrical sort of hammy sort of performance, and the advert were cancelled. They were dropped because he was no good. And it turns out it was a huge plot twist. The frogs can talk. They've been able to talk the whole time. They berate and then attack the chameleon for losing them the gig. The next advert, another turn. The ferret is doing the adverts now, but the ferret can't talk. The next advert, the ferret has a teleprompter. The next advert after that is a fake advert for the ferret's CD, which is out, featuring a duet with one of the chameleons. Then the following advert after that, there's a scandal leaked about the ferret's past where he took sexy photographs. One of the notable ones in this sort of snapshot is a ferret wearing a smoking jacket, which looks very much like the meerkat from the Compare the Market adverts. So I don't know if there's been any sort of copyright infringement happening there. And that's as far as I got. That I had to stop to join the Skype call. I didn't expect there to be so much content around these frogs. I don't know what time period this all took place over, but I think the first advert was a Super Bowl 95, and I think halfway through there's a mention of another sports game. So maybe it took place over the course of a year or something, and came back to the Super Bowl. I think it's testament to the fact that we were so starved for entertainment back in the 90s that we would be that excited about an ongoing like storyline in an advert.
I mean, I suppose the meerkat thing that you mentioned is the sort of successor to that sort of thing, isn't it? You do get adverts where a certain character or characters will reoccur, but maybe not in that same way where there'll be an ongoing storyline quite in the same way. Obviously, we've done the 90s adverts episode and touched on the W.H. Smith, Nicholas Lyndhurst family and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
A classic of the genre.
Yeah. Another shiver goes down my spine as I think about those adverts. What do people think the legacy of 90s drinking and smoking culture was? What do you think, or any sort of final thoughts or overall thoughts on the culture?
Well, I think what we've discovered is that some of the, I mean, again, we've mentioned this before on the pod. I'm sure we'll talk about it again, but some of the greatest advertising, sports sponsorship, sporting race car liveries, all that sort of thing, were based around cigarettes and alcohol. And obviously that they were banned, again, probably for the right reasons, but it's probably a shame that we don't see them anymore. But then maybe they're iconic because of that, if you see what I mean, because they're no longer around and you're no longer allowed to do it. Those things are looked on as being classics of the era. So yeah, that's the thing I would take away. It's just that it's a shame that we don't see it anymore, but it's probably correct.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. I don't think that I would have been encouraged to drink by these adverts, but I did want to drink Rolling Rock when I saw it. So maybe that's I don't think that's necessarily the 90s, but I guess if you have nostalgia for, or like some sort of brand connection to something that you like, maybe you were more likely when you get into that particular things. Like, so if Alex was, say, to start smoking, he would have smoked Benson and Hedges, possibly because of the connection to F1.
Yeah, no, that's definitely true. I if I smoked, I would have smoked things that were related to those teams that I love. So yeah, that's absolutely true. And I think with beer, I am attracted to stuff that I feel nostalgic about, like Stones, Caffrey's. If I ever see Bass, yeah, that's a big thing. Stubbies, yeah, that's all nostalgia. So it's definitely fed into my personal choices in that way. One final penultimate question about beer. Do you think the 90s spelt the death knell for mild and bitter and those sort of old school pints? Because you don't really see them that much anymore.
Well, Jack D had like a series of adverts for John Smith's bitter, didn't he?
Yeah,
in the 90s.
and then
that sort of carried it into, because that was Peter Kay advertised that in the 2000s, didn't he?
Yeah.
So there was still like a little, because their slogan was no nonsense, and then maybe since then we've decided actually we do want like a bit of nonsense.
Yeah, that's true. Us millennials are obsessed with a bit of nonsense.
We love
aren't
nonsense.
we?
Yeah, that's why we can't afford to get on the property ladder, because we just too much nonsense.
Yeah,
too much nonsense.
I have noticed that the bitters and milds are coming back a bit now in craft breweries and stuff. I've noticed a couple creeping in, which I'm quite happy about. But I think lager was definitely the king of the 90s. Well, maybe not the king of the 90s, because like I said, John Smith's was massive, but a big thing, I think, lager, just part of that sort of ladette culture of the 90s. There you go. I mean, we've not even had any time to really delve into Alco Pops. Probably worth an episode on their own, Alco Pops, I'd say.
Well, let's not forget official barber of the pod, Will Hodgson's opinion on Hooch versus Two Dogs.
Yes, Will made it clear that they think that Two Dogs was vastly superior to Hooch. So there you go. You heard that here first, unless you read it on our Twitter 2 weeks ago, in which case you read it there first.
Couldn't you get any Two Dogs in for tonight, Adam? Is that why you had to go with the Hooch in the end?
I'd never heard of it. I don't remember ever seeing Two Dogs anywhere. Yeah, I was completely oblivious to it until relatively recently.
Yeah, same here. I don't remember it. I never remembered it at the time. It's only through this podcast that I've really heard about it.
I remember there being a lot of different Alka Pops, but yeah, that one sort of maybe just didn't make its way into whatever shop my older looking friends were buying drinks from for me.
Just want to quickly wrap up some final correspondence, as we always promise to read everything out that we get sent. Dreamer with Conviction said on Instagram, I happen to know this is Ben Gillett, friend of the pod, said that he drank plenty of Hooch back in the day. So another reference to the mighty Hooch, one of the original Alka Pops. Knee Deep in the 90s, again, gave us some more correspondence and said, anything to do with the Alka Pop Castaway? I can't find anything online. It's like it never existed. I've never heard of Castaway. Have either of you?
No, it sounds like it could be like a knockoff of Reef.
Yeah, maybe it's an own brand version of Reef. That makes sense. Or yeah, as they suggest, it never existed, so maybe it didn't, and they've imagined it. Finally, this probably actually requires a bit of research that we haven't had time to do. But friend of the pod, Hannah Kelly Fletcher, says her first job was working in the Candy Shop. That's what it's called, the Candy Shop, which is a newsagent in Hallfield in Bristol, when she was 15, which was apparently technically 2000. So we may not want to reference it, but we are referencing it because 2000
all the
is
time now.
Part of the 90s. And she says she used to sell a lot of cigarettes. And she says a 20 pack of Lambert and Butler cost $3.99 back then. And I was just wondering what that would cost now. Has anyone got any ideas what 20 pack of cigarettes cost these days? It's got to be double that. And well, maybe not double that, but...
I picked some up a couple of years ago on behalf of a friend of mine, and it was around a £10 mark, I think.
Oh, wow. Okay, so yeah, it's more than double. But there you go. How times change.
Should have stuck with the chocolate ones. There you go.
Yeah, they probably cost 15 quid now.
Oh, yeah, that's true. That's true.
And finally, Nick Dibben on Facebook, another friend of the pod, said that in her family they had Blue Nun on special occasions. We'd eat dinner around the table when we had the family around. Crack open a bottle of Blue Nun.
What's Blue Nun? I'm sure you're about to say made famous by Alan Partridge.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's just I looked it up and it's a German white wine.
Okay.
Been around since like the 40s, I think.
Something that someone messaged me about. I just thought to say, and I think I was only aware of this drink after the 90s probably. But do you know Goldschlager?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, this gold
yeah.
cut your throat open, so that it went into your bloodstream quicker.
Well,
Everyone knows that.
That's the thing. Apparently, that was exposed as a myth, but I think
It's not a myth.
everyone believed that was true. Yeah.
The myth is a myth. If you're a true 90s head, you'll never believe that's a myth. It's true.
It's as real as
definitely
crop circles and the Bermuda Triangle.
Adam, it's been an absolute pleasure having you back on the pod to cover cigarettes and alcohol, and thanks for stepping in for me when I was temporarily indisposed as well as host of the pod. Keep us updated with all things locomotive, and we hope to have you back soon.
Oh yeah, thanks for having me on again.
If you want to get in contact with us about cigarettes and alcohol of the 90s or anything else we've talked about in previous episodes, or our What's the Most 90s feature, you know where to find us. We are on Twitter at allright90s, email allright90s@gmail.com, facebook.com/allright90s. That's all letters, no numbers in any of those. And then on Instagram, we are allright.90s.podcast. And we'd love to hear from you. Love reading out your correspondence. We just read through some lovely stuff in this episode, so it's always much appreciated. And Stu, I think next episode it's our birthday episode. It's our first birthday. It's the anniversary
coming up in the next episode. So we're talking 90s birthdays, and we want to hear all about your own 90s birthdays. What did you do for a party? Where did you go? Who did you have round? What did you get up to? So tell us all about your birthday experiences in the 90s, please.
Yeah, that would be great to hear from you, and we'll make it into a bit of a party and crack open some perfectly clear and some party rings and
some two dogs if we can get hold of it. Okay, well, thanks very much again for listening. We'll be back again in a couple of weeks with our first anniversary episode. Until we speak again, it's good night from me.
And it's goodbye from me. I'm just off to spark up a mile 7 and smoke myself silly.